Have you ever been, like, just stopped dead in your tracks by someone you don't know? I mean, really stopped. It's not that sort of adrenaline rush of danger or, that pleasant little buzz of finding someone attractive. We're talking about something else. That really sudden, powerful, sometimes deeply unsettling moment of, well, profound recognition. You see someone, maybe across a busy street or just sitting quietly on a bus, a silhouette in a doorway maybe, and bam. For just a split second, it feels like time stops. You get this intense jolt, like a physical shockwave of feeling. It could be anything: immediate rage, this totally irrational longing, or even just absolute dread towards a complete stranger.
It really is like an internal earthquake, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the stranger, this unknown person, suddenly becomes the epicenter. Psychoanalysis suggests this is anything but random. It's a sudden, sharp exposure of your deepest psychic architecture. Something cracks open. You feel instantly and powerfully that this completely neutral, unknown individual somehow holds a key to a secret about you. And it's usually a secret you carefully packed away, buried years ago, probably, buried for survival.
Right. And that's exactly what we're getting into in this deep dive. We want to peel back the layers on these everyday but uncanny encounters. We're looking at it through a psychoanalytic lens, exploring this core idea that the stranger in that moment isn't really, well, a person yet. They're more like a catalyst, a substitute, something our unconscious picks out to carry a feeling or a memory we refuse to look at ourselves.
And what's truly fascinating, I think, is the sheer speed. The unconscious executes this whole process instantly. There's no time for slow, careful thought or rational deliberation. It's just an immediate electric current, a tremor in the body that completely bypasses the rational mind. So this encounter, even if it looks totally mundane from the outside, it's actually a summons. It's the deepest, most unresolved parts of your personal history suddenly demanding your attention. Right here, right now.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics then. Starting with a really foundational concept, the return of the repressed. We all carry stuff, right? Burdens, old memories, maybe desires we learned were unacceptable, sometimes just pure searing childhood rage, or pain that was simply too much, too dangerous to handle when we were small. So to survive, we use this immense psychic force to just banish it, push it down, we repress it, shove it deep into the unconscious mind.
Exactly. And this is where the popular understanding of repression often falls a bit short. We tend to assume that when we successfully push that difficult stuff down, it just dissolves or disappears completely. But the psychoanalytic understanding is quite different. The repressed content, the pain, the rage, the forbidden desire, the feeling of abandonment, it doesn't just obey our command to vanish, it holds on to its full energetic charge. Analysts often describe it as something that lingers, festers, and waits. And it waits. Not with some kind of malicious intent, but with this innate psychic drive, this intelligence that's always seeking resolution, seeking completion.
It's waiting for the right moment, the perfect opportunity. And the unconscious is incredibly clever, isn't it, in choosing that moment? It seems to strike when our ego is maybe a bit tired, when our usual conscious defenses are momentarily thin, or crucially, when the environment offers up a suitable blank screen. And that's why the stranger is so pivotal. They are neutral, uninvolved. They're not tangled up in our daily life, our history. That makes them the perfect clean slate. The unconscious can just, boom, project our inner world onto them almost instantly.
And that leads us perfectly into the mechanism of projection. Projection is one of the ego's oldest, most primal defense mechanisms. It's fundamental. When we have some kind of internal content, let's say intense hostility or maybe unbearable shame, something that's just too painful or too contradictory to our self-image, the ego uses projection to essentially expel that feeling. It throws it out.
Right.
By attributing it entirely to the outer world, usually onto another person. We basically can't stand to feel it inside ourselves, so we unconsciously make someone else carry it for us.
It's like a psychological emergency eject button. The psyche whispers this ultimate denial. It's not me who feels this, crippling, dependent longing. It's that man over there who looks so lonely, I feel sorry for him. Or it's not me who harbors this deep, aggressive resentment towards authority figures. It's that woman who's clearly arrogant and needs to be taken down a peg. It's immediate, it's primal. It's designed purely to maintain the coherence of the ego, even if that coherence is, built on a massive self-deception.
But here's the critical pivot. The moment where it becomes more than just defense, it becomes revelation. Projection isn't only a defense mechanism. When we feel that sudden, inexplicable pull or that intense, visceral repulsion towards a stranger, we are fundamentally reacting to a fragment of ourselves, a powerful disowned part that we've cast out. We're reacting to what we expelled or what we refuse to carry any longer. So the stranger, in that intense initial moment, isn't isn't actually seen as a complex human being with their own life, their own story. Not yet. They are, for that instant, a temporary vessel, a screen, a stage, upon which our own internal drama is being performed, really for our benefit, even if we don't realize it.
That distinction feels incredibly important. It shifts the whole focus, doesn't it? From asking, who is that person, to what part of me is that person holding right now? Let's make this concrete with that example you mentioned earlier, the man on the platform, the one who triggers feelings of absence or maybe longing. Okay, so the deep memory behind this reaction might be something like this. You're 10 years old, standing by a lake. Your father's there, silent, watching you, but not really connecting, just present, but distant. Then maybe you turn your back for a moment, and when you look again, he's gone, vanished without a word. And the child self just buries that profound wish to be seen, to be chosen, to be held onto. The memory gets rationalized away later. Oh, he was just preoccupied. He had things on his mind.
But the unconscious doesn't operate on rationalizations. It resides in a timeless space, holding that scene, that feeling, in perfect, vivid clarity. So decades later, you're an adult. You see a man on a subway platform. He happens to be wearing a heavy gray coat, standing slightly apart from the crowd, hands deep in his pockets, maybe gazing into the dark tunnel ahead. Objectively, he's doing nothing remarkable, but your body reacts. Instantly, your chest tightens, maybe your throat closes up a bit, you feel a ghost of that old longing, and maybe even a phantom sensation like cold lake water on your skin. It's visceral.
Okay, but why him? Out of all the people on the platform, this is where the intelligence of the unconscious comes in, right? It selects this particular man because something about him, his silence, maybe that posture of removal, perhaps even the neutral color palette of his coat, allows your unconscious to instantly, well, drape him in the ghost of your father's silence, as you put it. He becomes the perfect, unwitting stand-in for that unresolved scene from childhood. The scene playing out is the aching fantasy. Maybe this time I'll be chosen. Maybe this time he'll see me and not leave.
Precisely. And the sheer intensity of that physical reaction, the tight chest, the feeling in the throat, that's a direct measure of how deeply that original experience remains repressed, how much charge it still carries. Had the trauma of that silent abandonment, that feeling of being unseen, been fully processed and integrated over the years, then the man in the gray coat would likely just be part of the urban background noise, barely registered. The moment of intense, visceral recognition is the unconscious waving a massive flag, signaling precisely what remains raw, unresolved, and very much alive within your inner history.
Okay, let's flip that coin. Look at the projection of repulsion, the other example.
Right.
The woman on the train, the one who just makes your skin crawl. Maybe she's loud, laughs too robustly, takes up a bit too much space, or just exudes this kind of carefree confidence that feels irritating, offensive even. And you feel this disproportionate surge of fury. It's almost violent. You instantly categorize her. She's entitled, she's inconsiderate, someone needs to put her in her place.
So if we follow this psychoanalytic thread, we absolutely have to ask, where does that level of intense rage truly originate? It's almost certainly not just about her volume or her taking up space. It's tapping into something much deeper. It's likely connecting to the subterranean fury that you, perhaps as a child, were never ever permitted to express. It's the anger that had to be swallowed whole because your survival, your connection to caregivers depended on being quiet, obedient, maybe grateful for mere crumbs of conditional affection. You learned deep in your bones that showing that loud, unapologetic, space-taking self meant punishment, withdrawal of love, maybe even separation.
Wow. So now, here she is, this woman on the train, loud, unapologetic, taking up space, and seemingly completely free of the internal rules and strictures that still govern your life. She becomes like the living ghost of the self you had to essentially execute, metaphorically speaking, to survive your upbringing. So the hatred you feel for her isn't really about her character flaws at all. It's a profound, maybe envious reaction to your own banished potential. She represents everything you were forbidden to be. And the fury that erupts is really the rage of your inner child screaming, why did I have to sacrifice that part of myself? Why wasn't I allowed to be free like that?
And this lands us squarely onto Freud's concept of the uncanny, des Unheimliche. The experience feels so terrifying, so unsettling, not because the stranger themselves is inherently frightening, but because the encounter reveals something that should have remained hidden. It brings the deeply familiar, the reality of your own buried self, into shocking collision with the completely unfamiliar face of a stranger. It's the return of the forgotten, dressed up as someone new. The Heimlich, familiar, homely, suddenly revealed within the unheimlich, unfamiliar, uncanny.
And the body speaks first, doesn't it? Before the mind can even try to rationalize it away. That tightening in the chest, the flush of heat, maybe even a sense of vertigo. The unconscious is communicating in its native language.
Which isn't logic. It's a language of tremors, echoes, and spectral images, as the outline puts it.
The stranger, in that moment, is essentially a message. Highly encrypted, cleverly disguised, but a direct communication from the party that's been exiled for far too long.
And think about the resistance we often feel in those moments. That strong urge to just dismiss the feeling, to look away quickly, or to immediately start rationalizing the stranger's behavior. Oh, they're probably just having a bad day. That resistance, that's the ego desperately fighting to maintain the repression. It's the self-preservation instinct kicking in, trying frantically to keep that emotional tomb sealed shut. Because opening it means confronting old, unresolved, often very painful material. And the ego generally prefers the status quo, even if it's a painful one.
That makes a lot of sense. So, if projection is that kind of instantaneous defense, like exporting a single intense feeling, we also need to talk about the longer-term scripting, right? The deeper patterns, which means we need to transition now to transference. This feels like a much deeper layer of emotional wiring, redirecting entire relationship dynamics from the past onto people in the present.
Exactly. Transference is essentially the unconscious blueprint of our past significant relationships, especially with parents or primary caregivers, being overlaid onto present-day figures. Freud first really articulated this from observations in the clinical setting. He'd noticed a patient suddenly treating him, the analyst, with the same suspicion or intense loyalty or perhaps childlike affection they had felt towards a parent, even when the analyst had done absolutely nothing objectively to warrant that specific reaction. The past was literally being relived, reenacted, right there in the consulting room.
Okay, but I need to push back on this a little, just for clarity. Most people, I think, understand transference in the context of therapy, or maybe really close relationships, partners, bosses, close friends. How can someone we just see for like 5 seconds on the street, someone we never speak to, never interact with, how can they become a transference object? Doesn't transference require some level of actual engagement or relationship?
But that's the ultimate paradox and really the genius of the unconscious mechanism. The stranger is the perfect, the ultimate transference object precisely because they're empty. They carry no shared history with you, no baggage of past interactions, no pre-existing expectations, no real-world reciprocal obligations. They are essentially blank, neutral, and that very emptiness makes them the perfect canvas. Think about it. If the stranger was someone you don't known for a year, their actual personality, their known behaviors would constantly interrupt and interfere with the pure projection of your past script. But because they are unknown, the unconscious can instantly paint those unresolved childhood scenes. The abandonment, the intense yearning, the silent rage, the conditional love onto them without any interference from reality.
Got it. So the psyche is like this ancient dusty theater. And inside, these unresolved scenes from our past are trapped, like those poor flies caught in amber, frozen in time. The original actors, mom, dad, whoever, are stuck in that past moment. But the emotional energy of the play itself demands to be finished. It seeks an ending.
Precisely. And then the stranger walks onto the stage, completely oblivious, just going about their day, and instantly the unconscious director casts them into a crucial role. Suddenly they are the silent father, or the critical, smothering mother, or the sibling you desperately craved attention from, or the friend who betrayed you. And crucially, the unconscious doesn't need a perfect lookalike. It doesn't require a precise facial match or anything that obvious. It just needs an anchor point, a trigger. It could be something subtle, a particular posture, a fleeting expression in their eyes, the rhythm of their walk, even just the style of their clothes. Just enough similarity, on some symbolic level, to trigger the entire script, the entire emotional charge of that unresolved scene from the past.
And you mentioned this mechanism is driven by the flow of libido. We should probably clarify that term, because I think most people hear libido and immediately default to thinking only about sexual desire. But it's broader here, isn't it?
Yeah. Much broader, yes. In this psychoanalytic context, think of libido as fundamental psychic energy. It's the driving force. You could think of it as a kind of emotional fuel or maybe psychic glue. It's the energy within us that constantly seeks connection, seeks attachment, seeks resolution of inner tension, and ultimately completion of these old emotional cycles. When the original object of that energy, say, the parent who withheld the affection you craved, or perhaps an idealized version of yourself that you feel you lost when that original object is unavailable or lost to time, that libidinal energy doesn't just dissipate. It doesn't vanish. It remains active, potent, and it goes searching. Searching for a substitute object, a stand-in, someone or something in the present environment who resembles the lost original, often based on complex, symbolic, unconscious logic. So it's libido, the seeking energy, not conscious choice, that suddenly latches onto the stranger with the gray coat or the woman who laughs too loudly on the train. It's an act of desperate psychic conservation, trying to find a place to land that charge.
Okay. And when this massive wave of psychic energy attaches itself to a stranger, the ego, our conscious self, immediately tries to slam on the brakes, right? It feels that intense, irrational pull or push, and it panics. It snaps into rationalization mode. This is crazy. I'm just overthinking things. That person means nothing. I need to get a grip, look away, think about something else. This feels like that resistance we talked about earlier. The essential guard at the tomb, desperately trying to keep the unresolved issues buried, trying to keep the old script from playing out yet again.
Absolutely. That resistance is palpable. But often the discomfort persists despite the rationalizations, the sudden onset of obsession, maybe replaying the brief encounter over and over, the physical ache that lingers. Perhaps a sleepless night spent ruminating about this person you saw for mere seconds. This lingering disturbance is the symptom. The symptom is the psyche's way of overriding the ego's resistance. It's like an alarm bell that refuses to be silenced. It's the insistent message bubbling up from the unconscious saying, "Pay attention. Something here is profoundly unresolved and demands your deep attention." The stranger was just the match that lit the fuse. The symptom is the fire alarm blaring.
Let's really unpack this with that detailed example, Daniel and the humming woman, to see how all these pieces, transference, libido, resistance, symptom, operate together. So Daniel, he's 38, Scratch is highly controlled, very rational, successful maybe in his career. His emotional life is probably managed, kept tidy, maybe like he manages spreadsheets. He's on a bus. He sees a woman sitting nearby reading a novel and humming softly to herself, just humming. And the physical reaction is instantaneous and overwhelming. His chest tightens dramatically. He starts sweating. His mind becomes absolutely fixated on her. Can't look away, can't stop thinking about her.
The humming, that's the sensory cue. It's the specific trigger that unlocks the powerful past scene. It connects directly to the memory or perhaps the feeling state of his childhood mother. Maybe she also hummed softly while reading, appearing absorbed, present yet unavailable. Perhaps her love felt conditional, unpredictable. As a child, Daniel might have sat silently near her, absolutely desperate for her to look up, to acknowledge him, maybe just touch his hand. He learned profoundly that his intense longing had to be kept silent, swallowed down, invisible, to maintain any connection at all. So the stranger's humming represents that complex mix. The mother's presence, which was simultaneously alluring, maybe comforting in a way, but also profoundly, painfully unavailable on an emotional level.
Wow. So the transference mechanism kicks in instantly. It activates that old, deeply ingrained neural circuit. If I could just watch her, if I remain still enough, quiet enough, good enough, maybe this time, this substitute figure, this humming woman, maybe she'll finally see me. Maybe this time she'll stay. Maybe this time I'll get the connection I craved. Daniel isn't actually reacting to the woman on the bus at all, is he? He's completely immersed in reenacting the pain, the longing, and the desperate hope of his 6-year-old self. The self who learned that love and attention were only granted, if at all, if he was perfectly compliant, perfectly invisible.
And this powerful reenactment is driven by what Freud called the compulsion to repeat. This is one of the most fascinating and, frankly, sometimes tragic aspects of the psyche. It's this relentless, almost automatic attempt to recreate the original unresolved trauma. Not necessarily, consciously at least, to heal it in the way we might think of healing, but more to master it. The unconscious seems to run the script again and again and again, placing different actors, like the stranger, into the key roles, desperately hoping that this time, in this new external context, the ending will finally be different. This time the silent father will speak. This time the humming mother will look up and truly see the child. This time the love received will finally feel unconditional.
But this leads inevitably to the cruel twist, the inherent heartbreak in the mechanism, doesn't it? Because the stranger, being a real separate person living their own life, completely unaware of the complex psychodrama they've been cast in, they cannot deliver the resolution Daniel craves. They're just trying to get to their bus stop. They know nothing of the script. They're utterly unaware that they're carrying the entire crushing weight of Daniel's childhood longing and hope.
Exactly. So when the fantasy inevitably fails, when the humming woman gets off the bus, perhaps without even glancing in his direction, remaining completely oblivious to the internal storm she triggered, the resulting ache for Daniel is devastating. It feels sharp, fresh, and deeply personal. But crucially, from this perspective, it is not actually a new wound being inflicted. It is the original pain, the original feeling of abandonment, the original hurt of conditional love, the original longing now simply dressed in new present-day clothes. It's the old ghost wearing a modern outfit. The intensity of Daniel's obsession, his sweating, his fixation, that intensity is a direct metric of how much that past self, that 6-year-old boy, is still actively suffering, still waiting, still believing deep down that resolution is possible if he just tries hard enough, waits long enough.
That completely reframes the entire experience then. The stranger isn't the potential solution arriving out of the blue. They are the essential, if often incredibly painful, question being posed by our own unconscious. And the question seems to be, what part of my own history is currently alive, active, searching, and desperately hoping, finally, to be seen, understood, and resolved?
And so as we move into this final stage of the process, the storm begins to subside. The stranger leaves. They get off the bus, turn a corner, vanish into the crowd. They disappear, completely unaware of the psychic tempest they momentarily caused. And with their departure, the projection collapses, the transference link breaks, the external world loses its intense magnetic charge, and the focus is often violently, uncomfortably thrown back inward, away from their vanished gaze or disappearing back and directly onto your own reflection. You are left, quite literally, alone with yourself and the emotional debris of the collapsed fantasy.
This quiet, maybe shaky aftermath. This is the period Freud called working through. And it sounds like it's not a sudden aha moment, is it? It's more like a slow, often agonizing, trembling process, where the elaborate fantasy, the hope pinned on the stranger, starts to fade, and the real work begins here. And it sounds messy, difficult. The ego, our conscious self, probably resists this confrontation intensely, because it much prefers the comforting, even if ultimately painful, illusion that the answer lies out there, in the form of that perfect stranger, that magical encounter.
Absolutely. The resistance is huge because the central, often very painful realization in this working through phase is acknowledging your own role as the architect of the entire intense experience. It's facing the fact that you constructed that stranger in your mind's eye, brick by brick, memory by memory, wound by wound, as the outline powerfully puts it. They were never actually real in the way you experienced them. They were a cinematic projection screen for your own deepest inner needs and unresolved history. And often you have to genuinely grieve the loss of that fantasy you held onto so tightly, even for a moment.
That realization feels like the crucial psychic pivot point, starting to grieve the past self. It sounds like it's often accompanied by a profound wave of grief, but critically, not grief for the stranger who left and didn't fulfill the fantasy, but grief for what was lost inside you long ago. Grief for the silent child waiting by the lake, grief for the teenager who had to swallow their fury to survive, grief for the young adult who learned the devastating lesson that love must always be earned through performance or compliance.
Yes. And we begin to see the underlying tragic pattern with more clarity. We have been, in essence, talking to ghosts, begging strangers on buses and platforms to be our parents, to finally give us the acknowledgement or love we didn't get, asking these substitutes to absolve us, to choose us, decades after the original wound occurred. The initial intensity of the reaction, the jolt, the obsession, that was the key. The key, the unconscious, desperately, brilliantly used to try and turn the rusty lock on the tomb of repression. The stranger was the necessary catalyst, maybe the scent that unexpectedly pulled the thread and began to unravel the entire complex, often painful tapestry of our unresolved past.
So the ultimate challenge, then, isn't about finding the right stranger or avoiding triggers. It's about the lifting of repression. It's about finally meeting that abandoned inner child. Once the stranger is gone and the noise of the fantasy subsides, we have to be willing to sit with that raw, aching void that's left behind and ask the deepest, most courageous question: what do you need from me now? Not from the world, not from the next person who happens to cross your path, but from me, from the adult self, here and now. And that's when the exiled child self, the one who cried alone in the closet, the one still waiting by the metaphorical lake for the vanished parent, can finally, tentatively, step forward into the light of your own awareness.
Exactly. And this lifting of repression, this integration, it doesn't necessarily demand perfect, detailed memory recall. You don't have to reconstruct every single traumatic event in photographic detail. It happens more fundamentally when we allow the feeling itself, the raw feeling triggered by the stranger, to simply live, to exist within us. We have to cultivate the capacity to allow the loneliness, the fear, the intense rage, the deep longing to breathe within our conscious awareness without us immediately trying to rationalize it away, fix it, numb it, or deflect it onto someone else. Just letting it be.
And the essential healing message, the one that starts to repair the old wound, is delivered inward. It's telling that child self consistently with compassion, I see you now. I am here with you in this feeling. I will not abandon you again like you were abandoned before. I will stay. This feels like the true beginning of internal integration. The slow, patient process of self-parenting, of welcoming and absorbing those disowned, exiled parts back into the wholeness of who you are.
Which is precisely why we can reframe the stranger not just as a trigger, but as the sacred interruption. They are the necessary spark, the flash of lightning in the dark that points you relentlessly back inward. So the goal is never really to just get over the intense feeling about the stranger or to forget the encounter. It's to meet what that encounter revealed. The abandoned parts of yourself, the swallowed rage, the postponed grief that they momentarily brought to the surface. That intense reaction wasn't pathological. It was actually the psyche's brilliant, desperate intelligence attempting to achieve healing and wholeness by showing you, in no uncertain terms, exactly what remains unfinished business within you.
It's a different way of thinking about it. The psyche isn't just seeking simple comfort or happiness in the immediate moment. It's seeking completion, wholeness. It demands that the full story be told, the suppressed feeling be finally felt, and the old wound be witnessed, primarily by ourselves. And the stranger provides that essential, maybe unwelcome disruption. Walking into our lives empty, unknowing, and briefly becoming the perfect vessel for everything we can no longer carry alone in the unconscious dark.
And this gives us our final, perhaps more hopeful, enduring perspective on this phenomenon. Other strangers will come along. The pull, the ache, the irrational charge it will inevitably return at times. Because the process of working through this deep material is often lifelong. It's not a one-and-done fix. But now, hopefully, when you feel that jolt again, the critical shift in understanding is this. You know it is not truly the person outside calling you towards them. It is you, your own buried self, your unresolved history, the child still waiting, calling you home, to yourself.
That feels like such a profound and necessary shift in focus. It takes the power away from the external event and places it firmly back inside. The stranger isn't your potential salvation arriving on a white horse. They are your signal, your symptom, and ultimately the symbol of your own unresolved past, reaching out for attention. They provide that necessary disruption, that jolt to stop you in your tracks and force, or at least invite, that essential internal confrontation.
So the key takeaway, perhaps for you listening, to apply in your own life is this. The next time a stranger triggers that intense, immediate feeling of recognition, that pull or repulsion, your first and most vital act is simply to tolerate the feeling. Tolerate it without immediately acting on the fantasy it generates. Don't rush to fix it, explain it away, pathologize it, or project it back out even harder. Instead, try to turn the question inward, almost immediately. What part of my history, what old feeling needs me to witness it right now? What is stirring inside me that this person has just inadvertently woken up? And then just give that feeling some space. Let it live and breathe within you for a moment, without judgment.
Because when the stranger inevitably vanishes, as they always must, they have their own lives to live. You won't be left with just emptiness or confusion if you do that. You'll be left with a painful, perhaps, but ultimately necessary and potentially healing presence. The presence of the parts of you that were exiled long ago, the grief you postponed, the truth you might have been avoiding, the parts asking for your attention.
And that leads us right to our final provocative thought for you to take away and mull over. The stranger was never really the mirror reflecting their reality back to you. You were the mirror all along, reflecting the ghost of your own past self, your own unmet needs, your own unresolved story, the life you might be waiting to live more fully, the sense of completion or peace you seek. It's ultimately not found by chasing their image down the street or endlessly analyzing them. It's found by turning towards, recognizing, and slowly, courageously integrating the abandoned parts of yourself that they so brilliantly and perhaps tragically pointed you toward.
Go deep. We'll talk to you next time.